you heard someone call your name when there was no one around? Have you ever felt that strange feeling that something or someone was trying to communicate with you, even in the most absolute silence? There are stories that make us question the boundaries between the living world and the unknown. Reports of voices that whisper in the dark, requests for help from beyond death, spirits who still wander, desperately seeking someone who listens to them. Today's story will make you think twice before answering a call in the middle of the night. For some voices do not belong to this world, and when you respond, it may end up bringing something that should never be heard. Mariana worked as a radio operator on a small police station in the countryside. The shift of the night was lonely, silent, and endless. The only sound that accompanied her was the squeaks and occasional cracks of the radio, mixed with her own breathing. She had already gotten used to the so-called routine: emergency, bar fights, broken cars on the road, any reports of invasions. But that night, something was different. Around 2 in the morning, while driving a sip of cold coffee and scribbled distractedly on a notepad, the radio emitted a strange sound. It was not a common call. It was a rough, distorted noise, as if someone were trying to tune in a wrong frequency. Mariana frowned and adjusted the controls. "Central, listening," he said, waiting for some return. Silence, just static. She leaned forward, focusing on the panel illuminated by the weak shine of the fluorescent lamps. Then the voice came up, weak, almost a whisper. "Help, someone hears me." Mariana's heart accelerated. She looked at the clock. 2:12 in the morning. Who would be calling so late? And why did the voice seem so displaced? "This is the police center. What is the emergency?" The answer came in fragments, as if the signal were being sucked by the emptiness itself. "Lost, dark, too cold, help me." Mariana felt a shiver traveling her spine. The voice seemed distant, but at the same time too close, as if someone whispered directly in his ear. "What is your location? Are you hurt?" The static became stronger. So, among the cracks of the transmission, something formed in the background, a different sound. It was not the voice of the person. It was a cry, weak, lemurious. Mariana swallowed hard. "I need you to tell me where you are. I will send a car to you." The voice hesitated. Then he whispered something that made his blood freeze. I've been here for so long ago." The phrase came with a terrible noise, a creak that resembled doors being dragged on a molded floor. Then absolute silence. Mariana tried to restore contact, repeating her call. Nothing. Only the cold and empty radio static. She checked the frequency identifier. That transmission should not exist. The frequency at which the voice had been captured was not in use for years. Her hand trembled as she landed the radio on the table. She couldn't explain, but she felt something or someone had just made contact, and I needed help. Mariana tried to ignore the chill that she climbed through her spine. Maybe it was an equipment error, a lost sign of some old season, but something inside her whispered that wasn't that. She took a deep breath and decided to investigate. Typed in the record system any occurrence related to that frequency. The first files were old, from the 80s, and most consisted of routine calls. But then, a case caught his attention. Case No. 047, 1986, radio operator, disappearance. Your heart shot. She opened the report. On September 14th, 1986, radio operator Mendez reported having received a strange call at an inactive frequency. During the broadcast, he mentioned hearing a voice asking for help. A few minutes later, Julius disappeared into the communication center itself. Your body has never been found. Mariana felt her blood flee from her face. In front of him, the radio another snap. Are you still there? She arrested her breath. The voice seemed clearer now, as if he had found a straight way to her. Yes, I'm here, he said, feeling his own voice shake. The transmission chose, and then a different sound came up. Something that should not be there. Steps. Slow, dragged steps. echoing as if they came from an empty corridor. But Mariana was alone. She got up, the fixed look at the radio room door. Outside, the building was deserted, just a long, illuminated corridor and the distant echo of the clock marking time. "Where are you?" he asked, without realizing that his own voice came out in a whisper. The radio snapped again, and then, for the first time, the voice answered something different, something that made your vision darken for a second. Behind you, the air froze in Mariana's lungs. His fingers closed around the edge of the table. She didn't want to look, I couldn't, but instinct one turned. The corridor was empty. Her heart beat so hard she could hear him in the ears. The weak light shake, projecting elongated shadows on the floor. No living soul, no visible presence, but the radio was still on. And then a new sound came from the transmission, something that should not be possible. Breathing, slow, heavy, coming from the radio. Mariana reached out, tremendously, and turned the volume button. The breath became higher, deep, as if someone were there, on the other side of the frequency. That's when the noise changed. The breath became a whisper, low and scratched. And Mariana realized that she was no longer a request for help. It was a laugh, low, weak, but growing. Mariana staggered back, the radio crackling like she was about to explode. The lamps blinked violently. The sound was now deafening, a mixture of static and voices. Several voices, speaking at the same time, as if they were trapped there, trying to leave. And then, absolute silence. The electricity of the room oscillated. The radio hung up alone. The only thing that remained was the echo of the last word whispered through the frequency. "Now, you heard me." The silence was deafening. Mariana was still, her body paralyzed by the dread. His gaze remained fixed on the radio, now turned off, as if he could still emit another sound at any time. She took a deep breath and tried to convince herself that it had been a paranoia outbreak. But something was wrong, very wrong. His eyes traveled the room. The watch on the wall marked 2:12 in the morning, the same time the first call had emerged. Your stomach rolled. The weather. Had you come back? She took the phone and checked the digital clock. 2:12. Fear took over his chest. He was trapped at a moment that was repeated, as if the reality around him had been corrupted by something that should not exist. The light of the room blinked one last time before erasing completely. Now Mariana was alone in the dark. A sound cut the silence. Tap, tap, tap. Someone was knocking outside the door. Your muscles crashed. His mind shouted not to open. Tap, tap, tap. The beat was stronger, more urgent. Mariana arrested her breath. The radio, even turned off, returned to squeak, and the voice resurfaced, now crystal clear, almost in his ear. "Let me in." The air around it was heavy, cold. She tried to move, but it was as if something invisible to hold her in place. And then, with a dry crack, the door opened alone. A dense darkness spread through the hallway, sucking the low light left. Something was there. Something that did not belong to this world. Mariana couldn't see, but she felt. The presence passed her as a cold air breath. His chest squeezed, and for a moment his whole body was numb. Radio chose one last time, and the final words echoed in the frequency, whispered in his own voice. "Now you're part of the transmission." And then everything stopped. The light came back. The radio was off. The door was closed. Mariana blinked, confused. The clock marked 6 in the morning. The shift was over. She looked around, her heart still hammering in her chest. Was it a delirium, a dream? He swallowed and took his bag. I needed to get out of there. But as he passed the hallway and looked at his reflection on the outlet door glass, a detail made her stop. His portable radio was still stuck in the belt. The screen shone weakly, showing a frequency that did not exist. And then, a whisper was heard from the radio. Low, hoarse, just like the first call of that night. "Help, Someone hears me. Mariana's blood froze. The broadcast was never over, and maybe never end. How many times have we heard something we can't explain? How many voices echo for forgotten frequencies, hoping someone, anyone, listen to them? Now, I ask you, what if one day is you who hear this call? If your radio, cell phone, or even a lost whisper in the wind brought a rescue request, would you have the courage to answer? Leave your comment below. Have you ever been like something similar? Any voice that called your name when there was no one? I want to know your story. And if you liked this video, don't forget to leave the like and subscribe to the channel. This helps me continue bringing dark stories to you. We see each other in the next video. This, if no one calls you before